In this example, we want to use the quadratic formula to solve 1/8 x squared plus x plus 5 halves equals 0. Okay, well, recall that the quadratic formula gives you the answer to a quadratic equation, and this is a quadratic equation. Remember, a quadratic equation is any equation of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. The quadratic formula will work on that kind of equation as long as a isn't 0. This one has fractions. If you're really into doing all kinds of crazy manipulations with fractions, feel free to go straight to the quadratic formula with this. I recommend instead clearing the fractions. Right? This method is called clear fractions. And what you do is you multiply both sides by the LCD of all the fractions and all the denominators involved. Okay, so I'm looking at my LCD here, right? I got an 8, so I'm going to put that in right there. Now I'm going to go along to all my other denominators and make sure they're included. Well, 1 is included in 8, and 2 is included in 8, since 2 divides 8. So my LCD is 8. The clearing fractions method, and this works because we have an equal sign. If you don't have an equal sign, you cannot clear fractions. We do have an equal sign, and the way it works is you multiply both sides by the LCD. Okay, I highly recommend doing this. Do not try to do the quadratic formula with 1/8 and 5 halves. You're going to drive yourself crazy. Let's see what happens here. I distribute this 8 through to all 3 of these. Alright, so in doing that, we get x squared plus 8x plus 8 divided by 2 is 4 times 5 is 20 equals, and then on the right we just have 8 times 0 anyway, which is 0. This is so much better. Look at that, no fractions. Right? So I'm going to use the quadratic formula on this equation instead of the previous one. These are the same equation. I just happen to like this version a lot better. Alright, so let's bring up the quadratic formula. There it is. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Set that to memory. It will serve you well. Let's see what we have here. Well, we don't have anything in front of the x. That means our a is 1. Here's our b, 8, and our c is 20. You always want to include the signs with a, b, and c, but here all the signs are positive anyway. Alright, let's solve this out. So we have x equals, alright, negative b, so negative 8 plus or minus the square root of b squared. That's 8 squared minus, 8 to the 6th, 8 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 20. Okay, all over 2 times a, which is 1. Alright, so now we just work this out, see what we get. Negative 8 plus or minus, alright, square root of 8 squared is 64, minus 4 times 20 is 80. Okay, so not bad. 2 times 1 is 1, clearly. Okay, so negative 8 plus or minus 64 minus 80 is negative 16. Oh, that's nice. Alright, so we're making progress here. Square root of negative 16 is 4i plus or minus 4i all over 2. Okay, let's break that up into 2 separate fractions. So negative 8 halves plus or minus 4 over 2i, and finally negative 4 plus or minus 2i. There we go, negative 4 plus or minus 2i. So there's really 2 answers in there for the price of 1. There we go. Let's try another one of these. We want to use the quadratic formula to solve this quadratic equation. We have 1/2 y squared equals y plus 1/2. The first thing, when it comes to quadratic equations, you do not want to be using the quadratic formula with fractions. It'll still work, but it's going to make you have a pretty lousy day. So let's clear fractions. Note that if we multiply both sides by 2, we can get rid of all those denominators. That's the clearing fractions method. Just multiply both sides by the LCD. Okay, let's see what happens when we do that. The 2's cancel over here. We have y squared equals, Here we distribute the 2 through, we get 2y plus 1. Okay, so we're making progress. Remember that a quadratic equation needs to be in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Anytime you see an x squared or a y squared, something like that, think x squared on one side equals 0 on the other side, or y squared on one side equals 0 on the other side. So we're going to need an equal 0 somewhere in this equation. Let's do it. So let's do y squared. Let's just subtract off this 2y plus 1. So that gives us minus 2y minus 1 equals 0. Okay, now for the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Let's do it. There's nothing here in front of the y, so our a is 1. Whoops. Try this again here. The a is 1. Okay, when there's nothing there, your a is automatically 1. Here your b is negative 2. See how I included the negative with the b? Similarly here, c is negative 1. Okay, let's put everything into the formula and see what we get. So in this case, it's y equals, since that's our variable, okay, negative b, so negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared. Notice how I squared the whole thing, okay, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 1. Be really careful with your negatives in these. All over 2 times a, which is 1. Okay, so let's just clean this up a little bit, see what we get. 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared is 4. Minus times a minus is a positive, so 4 plus 4 here, all over 2. Okay, so 4 plus or minus rad 8 over 2. But let's look at rad 8. Okay, rad 8, we're looking for perfect squares in as part of the 8 or as a factor of 8. 8 is 4 times 2, and 4 is a perfect square. So let's rewrite this rad 8 as rad 4 times 2, and out comes a 2 as we take the square root of 4. So rad 8 is actually 2 rad 2. Okay, so this is good. So we have 4 plus or minus 2 rad 2 all over 2. And now we'll take this 2 in the denominator. You want to make sure you divide both of these terms by it. Don't just divide one of the terms. That's going to give you the wrong answer. All right, so no problem. Dividing both gives us 2 plus or minus rad 2. Final answer.